Welcome to the Quiverful Adoptions Podcast. We're your hosts. I'm Elizabeth.
And I'm Casey. We are two adoptive mamas who have walked in your shoes, so we get it.
We remember the crazy journey of adoption like it was yesterday, and we are so thankful we get to share some amazing stories with you right here from the living room of our office.
Well, actually, we're sitting in the bathroom, but the living room does sound better.
Anyway, none of that matters. We're glad you're here.
So grab a cup of coffee and join us as we dive right in. Hey friends.
Hey guys.
We're super excited to be recording today in the studio. Mere inches from the toilet.
We're still here.
Today we're talking about enneagrams.
Yeah, how exciting is that?
Some of you are probably like, what is an enneagram?
That's okay. The rest of us, I was about to say the rest of the world, was in the same place a couple weeks ago. I feel like this is a new thing that people are just now starting to talk about.
Yeah.
So,
but according to Sarajane, it's ancient. So that's cool. Yeah. We had no idea. Elizabeth, what's your type?
I am a type 3 with a wing of 4. What's yours?
Type 3 with a wing of 2.
So very interesting. I will say I've learned a lot about, like I've had a lot of aha moments just from learning what my type is and then starting to follow accounts like Enneagram and Coffee. To learn a little bit more about myself, I guess, and just say, wow, yeah, that totally makes sense about who I am.
Yeah. Did you see that bingo thing that she posted not long ago?
Yes.
Girl, it was hilarious. Guys, so she posted on there, like, different things that fall under an Enneagram type 3. Mm-hmm. And one of the things is working on vacation, which is totally me. And then she posted this MASH thing, and one of the things on that, let me find it. It said, flirting techniques. Listen, I like you a lot. Well, on mine and Josh's first date, I said, I'm going to marry you one day. He looked at me like I had 3 heads, and I didn't hear from him for a few days. But I married him.
My favorite thing about Enneagram and Coffee's Insta feed is when she posts like images from shows and stuff and then like puts their type on top of them. And my favorite one so far I think has been Gossip Girl, just because I love that show. Like if they created a movie, I would totally go see it. I think that it needs to be a movie. I think they need to continue out with more episodes, even though like we know who Gossip Girl is now. Anyway, I thought it was so fun just to like see that Nate is a type 3. Like, that makes so much sense. So, anyway, it's lots of fun. Go give Enneagram and Coffee a follow. And if you haven't yet, go as soon as you get a chance and take the Enneagram test.
So, I've never seen Gossip Girl.
We need to change that. You need to binge watch Gossip Girl.
Okay, that'll be next. Right after I finish up with You on Netflix.
Oh my gosh, yeah, right now. I'm
so
watching
good.
that too.
Okay, so anyways, back to Enneagrams. We're super excited to have this conversation today.
Yes, and we think that y'all are really going to love Sarajane. She is just a wealth of knowledge on this topic. Y'all enjoy.
Bye.
Hey guys, today we have Sarajane Case here from @Enneagram and Coffee on Instagram. A lot of you are probably super familiar with her Instagram. She's one of mine and Casey's favorites to follow right now. And we're just super thankful that you're on the podcast today. So thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here.
We just wanted to start out by you kind of giving everyone a quick overview of what exactly is the Enneagram and kind of what sets it apart from other personality tests and things like that.
Yeah, so the Enneagram is essentially an ancient personality typing tool, and it is broken up into 9 distinct types that all have different motivations and fears. And the main difference between it and other personality types is that it deals with your motivation. So it's coming from an internal place as opposed to, kind of how our behavior shows up. And the other main difference is that it's movable. So there's levels of health. There's places that you move when you're in a time of stress, places you move when you're in a time of rest, and you have wings. So it's, even though you might be one type, you can show up in a range of different ways during different seasons of your life. And so it's a lot more living and breathing than a lot of other types.
So, what are some things that our families or anybody that is pursuing adoption should keep in mind, and ways to nurture themselves during the adoption process based on their specific Enneagram?
Yeah, so I think it's really helpful in any situation when you have a lot of unknown, a lot of waiting, a lot of self care that needs to be done, to really take into consideration, what do you show up like when you are in a season of stress, and how can you tend to that part of yourself? And so I think what the Enneagram does really well is it tells each number where you might look like, what you might look like if you're in a time of stress. So what I'm going to do is kind of talk you through each type and say, these are some signifiers that things aren't really going well for you right now, and then give you a little suggestion on how you can come back to your natural state of being.
Okay, cool.
So for type 1, we have type 1, which is the reformer. They're the most perfectionistic of all types. They tend to have a really intense inner critic. And type 1, during a season of stress, they move to type 4. So type 4 is in their lower levels of health. So when we do the stress move, we're moving to the lower levels of health of these other numbers. So 4, in its lower levels of health, can show up really moody. They can be really prone to melancholy and depressive episodes. So if you're a type 1, if you're resonating as a perfectionist, then you start to feel yourself isolating and getting more and more melancholy and depressive and not feeling excited about your day. Then you might want to start implementing some play into your life. You might want to start implementing some really positive self-talk, because ones have that intense inner critic. So it's really helpful if you can kind of intentionally drown that inner critic out, especially during the adoption process when you are waiting for someone to choose you. As a 1, you can really quickly get into some self-deprecation. And so if you could every day just intentionally write a few kind words to yourself on a piece of paper, seek out kind words from an affirmation from people in your life, but really intentionally seek out affirmation over and over and over again. So then as a type 2, so we move into type 2s, which are the helper. So helpers are most driven by serving other people. They're seeking love and acceptance and affirmation from other people, and the feeling of being worthy of love is what they're seeking. So they do that through service. So a 2 is going to move into 8 in a season of stress. And so an indicator, 8's the challengers. They're most confrontational. They're very direct. They're very honest. They aren't very feelings oriented. They're very truth and fact oriented. So as a 2, if you start to notice that you're putting your foot down really aggressively a lot, or you are kind of walking over people to get what you want or need, or you're shutting people down, that is a really good indicator that you need some self-care.
We interact, obviously. Well, first of all, it's really funny. I'll go ahead and give you a little insight. We are both a type 3.
Yeah.
And so it's fun. We have different wings, but it's fun just to see how we react, and also how, because we're both adopted moms, so how we have reacted to adoption in general in both of our separate adoption stories, but then also watching how our families react in these seasons. So as you're speaking of different types, it's funny because we're kind of seeing a reel of people that we interact with. So that's great. Very helpful.
Yeah, that makes so much sense that you guys would be engaging with all these different types. You probably can start understanding people's types based off of the descriptions too, which is interesting.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
So do you think a type 2 might be the type that is calling us frequently or sending us emails asking what's taking so long, things like that?
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of types who would probably do that, but they would do it for different reasons. So a 2 is going to do that from the place of, I'm scared this isn't going to work out because I want, or like even from the motivation of like, I want to help you guys move this along. Like, I am a good helper. I can be of service in this situation. And so I can contribute to the team. They have a harder time kind of sitting back and waiting for the process to happen. Yeah. And so what twos really need in that moment is to get their needs met faster. Like, they need to give themselves their needs way sooner than the point where they start to feel aggressive and demanding those needs. So, well before they're starting to feel resentful, they need to give themselves permission to kind of take some time, do what they need to do, take care of themselves. And that way, when that time comes, when they have those larger needs, it doesn't feel as intense or urgent. I'm so curious, excited to talk to you guys about threes because you're both threes. So I'm curious to hear what your experience with it was. But my initial inclination, so threes are the achiever. They are the ones who are most inclined to work toward the top, really do the best that they can do in any given situation. They're naturally motivated by being successful in whatever circle they're in. And their stress move is to 9, which is the peacemaker, which is the most go with the flow, kind of chill type. So my experience with threes is that oftentimes when they make that stress move, it starts to look like shutting down and numbing out and kind of shutting out the world and really spending a lot of time internally. And even some people go through weird seasons of Netflix binging, even though that's not a normal habit. They kind of want to just shut everything out and clear their minds. Does that feel accurate?
Yeah. So for my personal adoption journey, both of them, but primarily the first one because it was before, of course, we started the agency. I can remember, obviously, like we started the agency because of our past experiences, and we felt there was a way that we could do it better, do the adoption experience better from a professional standpoint. But during the actual journey, I can remember because my husband and I waited 7 months before we were contacted by our son's birth mother. And then after that, it ended up being a period of 9 months that we waited, which felt like an eternity. But it also, I can remember, at church and even with family, when people would ask, like, so give us an update, give us an update. I mean, it was almost like I kind of pulled back from my friend group at that time. I pulled back. I didn't look forward to going to family events just because, it was something that I just felt like I shut down over. Like, I'm usually I talk about like what's going on in my life with my, with people that I see on a day-to-day basis, but I can definitely relate to just kind of pulling back, shutting down a little bit, definitely binging shows on Netflix. I can remember, I think that I've binge watched Gossip Girl and like Pretty Little Liars and stuff like. I mean, that season in my life, I watched a ton of Netflix. So that's hilarious that even that's something that you brought up.
Yeah. So. And I can remember, so we had 5 months from the time that we started the process until Alame was home with us. And I read over 40-something books in that 5-month period. Yeah. Generally, I read like maybe a book a month. But during that 5-month period, I definitely like resorted to the couch and just kind of shut down.
Yeah, well, and I think it's interesting because threes tend to go through these really high seasons of productivity, and then they go through very, very low productive seasons. And so when you start to see that you're in that low productive season, most threes feel like they're failing in that season. They feel like they're living their worst fear in that moment because they don't feel like they're doing what they're supposed to be doing to be successful.
Right.
And the most amazing thing that you can give yourself as a 3 in that season is just permission. And you're just saying, this is part of my process. This is normal. This is my rhythm. And it's okay if I am not producing right now.
And that's a hard thing to do because I feel like Casey and I were talking about this earlier, how I wrestle with, giving myself permission for anything. Yeah. I mean, because I look at it as it's more of like an excuse. Like, I think of it as excuse or like, I don't know, like this it just is so against what our natural way of thinking is. So even the concept of giving myself permission to do something is it's tough. So it's very interesting.
Yeah. And I think that is interesting because with threes in particular, having, threes are the most societally driven in terms of like what they deem as successful, right? So like whoever you're surrounding yourself with is determining what success is to you in that season of your life. And so if you have, a lot of really high achieving people in your circle, which is incredible and a great asset for a three, it's also you have to remind each other, even like rest is progress too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so important.
Do you want me to talk about fours?
Yeah, that'd be great.
So fours are the individualist. They are the most in tune with their emotions of all the types and the most able to access all the different elements of emotion and celebrate them. They're mainly driven by creating an identity for themselves. And so oftentimes what they're doing, a lot of their energy and effort is put into creating that identity and identifying as something and standing out and being different. The four move in stress is up to a 2. So they become more helper, more on the lower health end of a 2. That can appear as codependency or relying on other people to do the things you want to do or be who you want to be or to feel okay. So the main thing for fours is when you start to notice that inclination to look outside of yourself, to look for someone else to make you feel okay, is that it's totally okay in these seasons of high stress to tend to yourself and not feel like you're too much, that your emotions are out above and beyond, because the world is going to tell you that those emotions are not okay. And sometimes it's important to separate yourself from those emotions, but during a season of high stress, what you need is compassion, and you need to be told and you need to tell yourself that it's so okay to experience that full range of emotion and to let yourself move through those as you are and as you do.
Do you feel like with fours that there's this tendency that, like, for example, in the adoption process, that they feel like, as far as their community at large, that they don't feel like anybody understands what they're going through? And so what's kind of the point of, I don't know, talking about it or, asking for support or encouragement, because it's just like, well, no one really gets where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I think that you nailed that. I think the biggest tendency for a 4-2 in these moments is to feel like they're alone and like, yes, maybe someone else has even gone through the adoption process before, but their situation was not the same as the situation that this 4 is having to the minute detail. And so what they are seeking in that moment is they're trying to gain understanding. They're trying to be understood by constantly clarifying that they're not understood. But for our fours out there, you don't have to be understood in the exact detail of the experience. It's so okay if someone can just sit with you in that moment, and they may not understand everything that you're experiencing, but maybe they understand process, and that's enough.
Right.
Yeah, so 5s are the investigator. They're driven by the desire to feel like they are capable. So they take in all kinds of information and things along those lines in order to feel capable. So they're constantly researching, they understand kind of the intricacies of the things they're involved in to an intense and amazing degree. And so for a 5, that stress move for them is going to be at a 7. And so they're going to be on the lower health end of 7. So they're going to be a lot more scattered, a lot more self-interested. They're not going to be as able to access the levels of emotion that they may be experiencing inside. They're going to want to run from their problems. So for a 5, when you start to recognize that you're feeling scattered and disorganized and detached, it's important that you come in and really trust yourself to be willing to put yourself out there and talk to somebody. So 5s have this amazing ability to experience a whole world internally and not express that externally. And so what you can do is really take a few moments, take a breath, and be the leader that you are and ask for what you need. Ask for the help that you need. Put yourself out there, make those connections, and be willing to be vulnerable.
Sounds good.
And so our sixes, I think sixes might be one of the ones with the hardest time with this process. Sixes tend to be the most concerned. Well, they are the loyalist. They are naturally the most concerned. Their biggest motivator is safety and security. So they want to know that everything's going to be okay. They have everything they need, and they are well taken care of, and they have their safety nest, So sixes are really prone to worst case scenarios and really looking at a situation and imagining all the ways in which it could go wrong. So I can imagine in the adoption process that would open up a world of playing into your fears. So sixes in stress, they're going to move to 3. So they're going to be a little bit more competitive, like on the lower end. Much more competitive, much more comparing. They're going to look around to other people and see, what are other people experiencing? Why am I not experiencing that? Is everything going to be okay? And so my honest recommendation for 6 is when you start to feel that coming up, when you start to look around and compare, is really just focus on meditation. Focus on calming your mind every single day, committing to a meditation practice if you can, to create a little bit of space between the thoughts that you're having and your feelings and your reactions to those feelings so that you can just sit with the process and let it be okay.
So the 6s might be the people that are looking at their profile book. Profile books are what we present to expectant mothers who are trying to choose a family to adopt their baby. So these people might be the people that are looking at their profile book and comparing it to other families' profile books and wanting to constantly redo it, saying, well, maybe we're not good enough for a mom to choose us.
Right. Maybe we're oversharing in this department. Maybe we should share more about this because this person shared more about this. And just like kind of comparing themselves as well as comparing their wait time and just thinking like, okay, well, everyone's passing us by and other couples are matching and being chosen by expectant mothers and we haven't been.
Yeah. So I would say 1s, 3s, and 6s are likely to do that, all for different reasons. A 1's going to feel like everything could always be better. So they're going to look at that profile book and see other people who did things a little bit better than they thought they did and try and constantly improve. A 3 is going to just want to have the best one, right? Like you guys are going to be inclined to just do it the way that it should be done, right? The best possible way. And then a 6 is going to doubt themselves the whole way. Every decision that they make, they're going to think that they might not be making the right decision. They're going to question every step of the process.
Right.
And they're going to be skeptical of the people that they choose to help them. So, they're probably the ones who have the hardest time trusting you in the beginning of the process. But then they're probably going to be your biggest cheerleaders on the back end.
Right.
Makes sense.
So then we move into 7s, which are the enthusiast. And 7s are driven by freedom. They want to feel like they have choice. They want to make sure that they have everything that they need in terms of never having to be trapped in emotional pain. They want to make sure all of their needs get met in terms of emotionally. They want to always be happy. They want to stay on the bright side. So 7s also really struggle with rest because they don't want to sit with their emotions. They really tend to stay busy. And 7s who are in a season of stress move to 1. So they can become pretty critical and perfectionistic of other people and of themselves in seasons of stress. So for a 7, if you start to find yourself being kind of nitpicky, kind of blaming people, feeling really critical of yourself, trying to change yourself all the time, those are really good indicators that it's time for you to take it easy. Now 7s struggle with taking it easy, and I think the best advice for a 7 is to treat rest as play. And so you might not rest like other people. You might not be able to sit on the couch and watch TV and chill out. You, for a season at least, are probably going to just need to have more fun And that's okay. Let yourself laugh and let that be your rest and your easiness for a little while.
So would you say that, like, for sevens, it's important to have a good community around them so that they can do things like go out, you know, and have a game night, or, you know, like do stuff as, you know, to get them out of the house, like where you're saying for fun.
Mm-hmm.
So having a strong community would be super beneficial to an adoptive couple who one of them is a 7.
And 7s are kind of lucky in the sense that they will make play no matter where they are. So
Okay.
what they need to be more cautious of is not ostracizing the people in their lives and kind of ignoring them, like, because they're in that hypercritical mode, they're going to start nitpicking the people that they love. And so for them to really just say, okay, I'm starting to nitpick, I need to engage with this in a playful way, and I need to find more fun, or I'm going to stay on this track of pushing people away, looking for what's wrong with them. So 8s are the challenger. They are driven by the desire to not be controlled. They tend to, because they don't have the desire to be controlled, they tend to control their environment. They're also very capable, very equipped leaders, and are naturally charismatic. They're very honest and direct, which can oftentimes lead them into conflict, even though that's potentially not their intention, right? Their intention is just to tell the truth, and they forget that some people aren't ready for what their version of the truth may be, or they may not agree with what you see the truth to be. And that can lead to a lot of conflict for that 8. The 8 is going to move to 5 in a season of stress. So if 5 is the most isolated type, so the most introverted of all the types, the most inclined to go internal, to kind of shut out the world. So if an 8 starts to see that they're becoming a little bit more reclusive, hermity, then they need to really, that's kind of their wake-up call, that they are in need of some self-care. And so for 8s, they're really going to have to release control of the timelines and commit to the process well before they decide to adopt. They need to say, okay, I'm committing to the fact that I have very little control over this situation, and I'm gonna have control over my response to how I engage with this situation.
Okay.
And so for 9s are the peacemaker, and they are primarily focused on peace of mind and feeling at ease, and they are very conflict avoidant. So they're going to look around and see if there's any potential thing that's going to disrupt their peace of mind, and try to bring that and try and do what they can do to make sure that does not get disrupted. So the 9s are in a season of stress going to move to type 6, which means they're going to become worst case scenario. They're going to worry a lot more. They're going to become a lot more high stress. Now, a big thing for 9s is that that 6 move can look like closing a project before it ever starts. So 9s are going to really struggle with the process of adoption in terms of like the paperwork and the logistic tasks and the things that have to get done. So it's really a lot about, you're going to need to do like one step at a time and commit to doing a little bit every day of both getting the process, doing what you need to do to make the process move forward, and then something that you need to do for self-care. And it's just like, I'm committing to this very low level of commitment every day that's not so stressful, but is pushing me a little bit beyond what I'm used to.
That makes sense. So these people might be people that take 2 and 3 and 4 weeks to get their information back to us after we've sent them instructions on how to do it.
Yes, exactly. And they're going to always feel like there's not enough instruction for what they need to do. Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. And something else that I love about all of this is, obviously it's interesting, like figuring out, you know, where your type lands in this adoption journey, and how, like, all of these things are very beneficial. But another thing that I think is super beneficial is just kind of having this as a conversation with their spouse. So like adoptive mom, like for my situation, I'm a 3 where my husband is a 7. And so like understanding the different types and how they're going to be so that you can kind of gauge like, okay, I see, that shit needs some, like he's going to need to go have some fun soon or, thinking about it in that light.
So I'm a 7, and one of my big things is I have to play hooky sometimes. And if I don't play hooky, if I commit and show up every single day the same all the time, I start to resent my life. And in the cure is just one day of playing hooky and having fun. And then I'm back to normal and I'm okay being where I'm at.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Like giving them one night out of the week where you don't talk about where we are with the adoption process.
Yes, exactly.
Well, also like, and this is just for our adoptive families out there, maybe some of you have already adopted, and maybe as your child grows, like even understanding how to, communicate with them. The Enneagram types are just fascinating to study. And so I have some of my friends that just look at their type, and that's the only thing that they look at. And I'm not like that. I'm such a nerd that I want to know a lot about all the different types, because I'm like, we never know what type of person I'm going to interact with. And so it's also, just thinking about my kids and what, obviously they're too young right now to kind of figure out what their type is going to be. But, as they grow, and even figuring out like how they're going to deal with their adoption stories. And I don't know, it's very fascinating. Casey, do you have anything that you think that would be interesting as far as other than like considering your adoptive?
Yeah. I think
your
that
spouses or
it'd be interesting to see like what my children's birth mom is, because I think that would really, I have my guess as to what she is, but I think that it would help us just navigate our relationship even better.
Yeah, and so Casey and I talked earlier, one of the things to think about, like for some of our families who have received placement and who have an open adoption with their child's birth parents, maybe like sending them the link to take the test so that, we can figure that out and figure out better ways to love and encourage them, and, really what would be special for them. And so,
yeah. I love that. And I want to say that, with our son, what we do is we let him tell us. So I talk to him about all the types, and he's 7 at this point. We started this maybe when he was around 5. But we talk about all the types, and he tells me where he is right now. And right now he's an 8 because he likes to do things his way. And, we talk about it, and that's his reasoning for it. And it's a conversation of him understanding himself and me saying, okay, I commit to engaging with you as you tell me who you are. And I will continue listening as you continue telling me who you are.
That is so neat. I love that. Well, that makes me feel like I can go home and start talking to it, at least to Grant, a little bit about it.
So what age is your Enneagram number pretty much set?
So there's multiple thoughts around it. So there's one way of thinking about it, which is that there's a childhood wound that essentially establishes your Enneagram type. And so in that situation, you're set much later. And then there's the belief that you're born your type, and that the childhood wound theory is really around what you're sensitive to naturally as a child, which I'm more inclined to that, because that takes so much pressure off of the parents to not feel like they're giving their kid a wound and creating some sort of defect in them, as they grow.
Yeah.
But I think it is, and I can look back, into my life, and I have, other people I've worked with can look back into their life and say, yeah, I was naturally more sensitive to this particular thing as a kid. Like for me, I was always wanting to make sure that I had everything I needed. I was very sensitive to that, and having things done in a way that felt really good to me. And 3s a lot of times, as kids, wanted to be the chosen one. They wanted to be picked out from the crowd, and like in class or in school, they wanted to be used as the example. And it's a really common 3 experience.
That's me all the way.
Accurate. Yeah.
For sure.
So what would you say to the person that feels like they relate or they can see themselves in multiple types?
Yeah, good question. I get asked this a lot. And so I would say in that moment is a couple of things. Number one, look and see if those types are connected in any way. So if you think you might be a 1 or a 7, you might notice that 7 and 1 are interacting with each other. There's a line drawn between them on the diagram. And start to see, okay, if this is this where I might go in a time of stress more than it is, what I am on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that a lot of times we get hung up on the personality traits of each type. And I do that a lot on my account just because it's easier to make, graphics about, and it's kind of fun and playful. But really the Enneagram is about what's happening inside of you. And so if you're thinking, I feel like a 7, but I'm showing up like a 4 a lot externally in these descriptions, it's what you're driven by. So look at the descriptions, read about the types, and see what their driving forces are, see what their fears are, and see which one you're connecting to the most. And if nothing else, really see which fear you're connecting to the most, because that is going to help you so much more than all of the rest of it. All of it will start to make sense if you pick the one that the fear you resonate with more than any of the others.
I love that.
Also, yeah, and also we get hung up on, we type other people when we get excited about the Enneagram. You start to kind of see them as a number.
Right.
It's a really normal part of the process. But what can happen sometimes is that you have friends and family who are telling you what they think you are. I don't see that as a moral issue as much as I see it as a confusing thing that we're doing to people. Like we're confusing them because, for a lot of, you might exhibit in a certain way because you're in a season of stress, or you might exhibit in a certain way and it have nothing related to your number at all. You just happen to be warm and inviting as a person, even though maybe you internally are experiencing yourself as a different number that isn't described that way. So all of that to say, drown out the people who are telling you what they think you are and really think for yourself and look at the numbers and see what you're actually driven by and afraid of.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. I have one other quick question. So when someone is taking this Enneagram test, what kind of mindset do you think is the most helpful for them to go into it as? Because I know just like I can remember my senior year, I did a psych project where we had to take different types of personality assessments. And I can remember just by the end of it, just feeling like, I don't know that I was my authentic self in those last few. So do you have any pointers for people who are thinking, okay, I've heard this podcast, I want to go home and take my, or I want to get home and take my Enneagram test and see what I am. Do you have any pointers of how to just clear out their mind so that they can get an accurate?
Yeah, I love this question so much. Thank you for asking it. So I think a lot of times when you take these tests, they're asking you questions and it can be really confusing, particularly for certain types like 9s and 3s and 6s even have a kind of a hard time with this because it's, they're asking you very specific questions that maybe you haven't thought about in terms of how you actually feel inside, as opposed to how you should feel or what the right way to feel is. So what I really say is think about who you've been most of your life over the course of your existence, how you've shown up the most, not just how you are right now. And then also how you actually are in practice, not in belief. So a good example of this is a lot of 7s type as 2s. And it's because they ask questions like, do you think it's important to help people and to love people? And of course, everyone wants to say yes to that. But in practice, most 7s really resent feeling needed and having expectations put upon them. So yes, while they want to feel like it's important to help people, they also aren't practicing that over the course of their life for the most part.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely go in with where you've been most of your life, and then what are you doing in practice, and being as, honest with yourself about who you are and who you've been as you possibly can, and be okay with the parts of you that you don't feel as comfortable with. The Enneagram really makes you look at the things about yourself that you're not particularly proud of, right on. Like, and it's okay that because we all have that, and there's 9 types to prove that we all have that. And everyone feels that way about their own type. And so when you get to these questions that you kind of want to give the fluff answer to, the right answer to, make sure that you're being honest with yourself about what you're practicing and what you truly feel.
Love that. Yeah, I love that too. I guess, do you have anything else, Casey?
No. Do you have anything else, Sarajane?
More than, I think if you guys don't take anything else away from this, I really hope that you take away that it's completely okay for you to experience those stress states as indicators. It's not an indicator that you are flawed in some way. It's not an indicator that you are broken. It's an indicator that you need a little love, and you're in full permission to give yourself grace, compassion, and tenderness in those moments.
Love that.
I love that. If anybody has any other questions about Enneagrams, they can definitely follow along with your Instagram. It's full of, I love the little movie and show where you've got images where you've got their types labeled. They're really great. And then there's some fun bingo games and lots of like interactive things that they can find on your profile. So I would definitely tell all of our listeners to go check out Enneagram and Coffee. And we are just super thankful that you've taken the time to chat with us today, Sarajane. We are very thankful for your account. We have really enjoyed following along. So
yeah, thank you, Sarajane.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Have you heard about the Promise Summit? If you are out there and you're listening right now and you are hoping to adopt, or you're an adoptive parent, or you're struggling with infertility, or maybe you feel called to adoption and you just have no clue where to start, then you need to be at the Promise Summit. Casey, tell us a little bit about what the Promise Summit is.
The Promise Summit is a Christian conference for couples considering adoption, in the wait of adoption, and or families who have adopted. This event is packed with powerful speakers, incredible worship, and a panel that represents all members of the adoption triad, and is sure to be a weekend that you will never forget. Our hope is that you leave the Promise Summit forever changed and armed with the promises from God that will encourage you throughout your entire adoption journey.
The Promise Summit will be held May 3rd and 4th in Greenville, South Carolina, and we would love to meet you there. You can find out more information at thepromisesummit.com or on Instagram at The Promise Summit.